Hi, this is Katie. This video is going to be both a construction video as well as a product review video. So I'm going to start with the product review. This is the Birds and Branches stamp set and the coordinating matching Birds and Branches die set. You can see what I do here. A lot of times what I'll do is to take a pen and outline my dies, because that way if I see an empty spot, I know that I've got a die missing from it. The other thing that I do, I have a small 3-ring binder that is a half-size sheet. It's a 8.5 by 11 that's been cut in half, and then I'll go through and I'll die cut everything that's from that set and put them on a display, just because I think it's a whole lot easier for people to visualize what they're getting when they see it laid out like this, rather than when they see it laid out on the card. And the interesting thing, you look at it and sometimes you process and sometimes you don't. This one, it was interesting to me because I guess I expected that it was going to cut out a circle, but it doesn't. It cuts out the hole. This one is 3 little eggs, but it's a single die, but they all 3 are cut individually. This one, I love it that they give you the legs facing both directions. You could take that piece of paper and flip it over, but that's okay. Now you can cut 2 at a time. For this spray, if you wanted to go back and add some flowers to it for layering, they're giving you this shape flower. They're giving you this one, which could be like a closed up flower. And they're giving you 2 of the even smaller ones that could be flowers that you could make some real interesting layering out of that. And then here's the other interesting thing. They're giving you the solid shape bird as well as the detailed bird die, but they don't layer. They're not made to go together. So for example, here is a die cut bird, but you can see that it doesn't, well, let me flip it over. It doesn't exactly match the shape of the base down here. This is made instead to die cut the stamped birds. So if you stamp the birds, these are the dies that you would use to cut them out. And then these have just a slightly different configuration to the body shape, so they don't quite match those dies. I thought I was going to get some cool effect with layering them, but that is not the case. So that is something to be aware of if you're thinking and planning ahead how you're going to use these dies. The only other comments I'll make on this, there was nothing on here that I thought was particularly hard. I like the idea that you can use this for stenciling as well as using it for die cutting. There's a lot of possibilities if you're using this with a class. You could have everybody buy 1 die set and then have them make a shaker card with that, show them how to do stenciling with that, do a lot of different layering with putting the bird's nest over it and then layering some birds on top and get some really cool looking effects out of it. So yeah, I could see using this one in a class very easily, and none of these parts were particularly difficult to cut out. All right, let's talk about construction of the card. Welcome to the first make and take. I hope you've had a lot of value in the event so far. As you might probably know from some of the communications, we are not able to send any stamped images with the make and takes. So you'll notice that your make and take packages have lots of punched pieces and die cut pieces, but don't have any stamped images. Joyce and I, when we were going through here, we went through and looked at all the catalog samples and looked at and tried to find ones that we thought that we could do some sort of case that wouldn't need to do any stamping. In other words, projects that we could do just with die cuts. So the case that we're going to do is a card similar to this one right here. Now it's going to be changed up a little bit because when I looked at that, that just wasn't bright enough for me. And case doesn't mean you have to copy it exactly. It means that you use that as a model. All right, so these are the pieces that you should have in here. And like I said, this project is going to be similar to the one that's in the catalog, but not exactly the same. So I'm going to just pull that out right there. And then I'm going to show you a few things that I did in preparation to give you your projects. Don't throw this away. Keep that piece because we're going to use it for part of the project. We're going to use this as a stencil. You see that stamping that's in the background, and that really was stamped with the leaves and the branches here, but I figured we could do exactly the same thing with Versamark and using that hole for sponging. So don't throw that away. which means you're going to need one of those pieces of sponge that you have. I'm going to speak briefly about this piece right here, and then I'm going to put this out of the way. This is the sentiment piece, and you'll have to, I mean, we have lots and lots of sentiments that fit on here, and in fact, the Birds and Branches stamp set itself does not even have any sentiments in it. So you would have been coming up with a sentiment on your own to put on this card anyway. I do want to show you something about this punch in just a moment, so let me pull the punch up here. My blue piece hasn't been die cut yet, again, because I want to show you something about the die cutting. And then you've got the other two pieces. What I did, I decided to, it wasn't bright enough for me. So we're going to layer this piece on top of the vanilla piece. Once I do that die cut, the vanilla will show through. And then this is a piece of that new brass foil, but my sample card, which I have half done and haven't finished yet, I just really like the way that sparkle showed up, just real thin little line of shine underneath there. All right, so first of all, just to talk to you briefly about how this piece was created, how challenging it is to get that piece of paper in there and get it exactly centered. And I think part of the problem is because, like, if you think about seesaws and think about lever action, think about like an oar in a boat. This is where your fulcrum is, and so if you kind of have to turn it over to the back, because it's real easy to have this thing not exactly lined up in there. And so you just want to be looking at the edges of the little shoulders of the end of your tag, just to make sure that it actually is centered before you punch, because the risk is that then you get something that's a little more squared off on one and circled on the other. This one turned out real nicely. Okay, so now I have a tag that's got a punch on one end. What if I want to punch on the other end? If I want it to be long, no problem, I just stick it back in. But if I want it to be short, then I have a little bit of a problem. But that's where your best friend comes in. Everybody keeps a package of Post-it notes on their table. Just going to cut that off. And then now it's way too short for me to be able to hold on to it and stick it all the way in. So I'm just going to use that Post-it note as a handle. And once again, I'm going to look from the bottom side before I punch it. You can see how much trouble I'm having here, and I'm not even exaggerating the problems. But I think you get the concept here, that if you're going to do this in an event live with people and have them punching their own, you want to make sure that you're telling your customers that they should be looking from the bottom in order to get a perfect punch. Okay. So now I have one that will go into someone's package. Here's the second thing that I wanted to pass along before I got into construction of this card. And then the other thing I was concerned about was having it exactly parallel to the edge, even before I Post-it noted it down. So here's what I did. I took a piece of our grid paper, cut myself a hole, so now I can line up the edges of the blue card along the edge of the hole, and then I can go ahead and lay this right on the lines to make sure that now it's going to be parallel before I cut. And then I can come in with my Post-it notes and hold it in position so it won't pivot when it's in the machine. So yours will come out of the bag probably looking like that. And then it's just a matter of punching off the... All right, next up is to get your Versamark and a piece of sponge. Stampin' Up! Art sponges are the best. These things are cheap, but I cut mine into 6. All right, I'm going to bring my sample card in here so that you can see what I did with the Versamark. And you can see that my plan then is I'm going to come and overlay it with this die cut piece that looks about like that. And what I wanted to do is leave room for the birds up on top and the sentiment over here. So here's my hole. And I want one that comes down, and what I did was I kind of looked for, it gets fat in this point because what it's done is it's cut several thin things, but you can see where that hole is right there. So that's why it gets fat. So I kind of tried to hold it so it didn't look like it was fat. And this, by the way, is a really fun technique to teach your customers also that they can do double duty with a die cut and not throw away the hole. And the beauty is that if you pull it up and decide that you've missed any spots, you can always go back and fill in, like maybe right there a little bit. I can just lay that right back on there and go back and add a little bit more. Now I wanted to fill in a little bit, so I'm going to angle it up this way and try and catch this branch. And once again, post notes are your friend. I don't want to catch the bottom part of this leaf, and I don't want to end up catching this leaf. So I'm just going to block off those holes and make sure the bottom of my branch here in that crack is going to come out right from about where that horizontal branch is. And then I'm going to come back with my Versamark again. So leave a comment if this is something you've done with customers before, where you show them how they can use the die cut like that. I think I'm going to try and get one more coming out over there just for fullness. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so the next thing I want to do is to add this piece and add the brass foil and then get it mounted on the vanilla piece. I made a mistake and I'm going to fix it right now before I put this on here. I want to leave these leaves without any glue on them because I'm not sure where they're going to sit with respect to my my sentiment. This was the sample that I made straight from the sample from the book before I decided that I needed the foil in there and the vanilla. I hope you agree that it looks a whole lot better with the vanilla and the foil behind it. But this set of leaves ended up being on top of my sentiment piece, so I want to get that glue off of there before I turn it over. Mistake pretty much fixed. It'll be easy enough to pull up if I need to. All right, I need a pair of tweezers. Now I want this to angle down somewhat because I want the birds to be able to sit high enough above it. So this is just a matter of however you think it looks good for you. And I just wanted to make sure that fat part wasn't next to the edge, so I left it so that two of the skinny pieces were off the edge. Now, to get that brass piece on, I gave you a 1/4 inch strip, but I decided a 1/4 inch was way too much to be showing. I just wanted that hint of a little bit of shine underneath there. So here's what I did. Right, now that's ready to put on the vanilla. I think that's looking really pretty. I am so happy I decided on this color combination. I do like how easy the sample in the book was, but it just wasn't bright enough for me. I really think it needs that brightness to be on there. All right, and that misty moonlight, isn't it a nice combination with a navy? Let me get my glue again. By the way, this is a trick I learned from Lori Verdon. Thank you, Lori, to keep your glue upside down in a little container. I'm just using a little vase. Okay, so at this point, it's almost done. It was pretty easy construction once you get past the gluing down all the little pieces and figuring out the stenciling aspect, which, by the way, like I said before, that's a good thing to teach your customers. Then it's just a matter of gluing all the rest of the pieces down and choosing a sentiment that's going to fit on this little label down here. So let me do that real quickly. All right, so now I want placement of this sentiment in here, and yes, I think I am going to stick it underneath these leaves. I could have used dimensionals on that, but I didn't. These things are flat, and if they're going to be on top of the sentiment piece, then I didn't want to put the sentiment up on a dimensional. And actually, there's a little bit of sticky still on the back of mine, so that worked out real nicely. Now you will need a glue dot to hold on the bow. I pre-tied the bows for you, and it looks pretty wonky, I'm sure. But you can futz around with it a little bit. The glue dot will hold it into shape. I left the ends really long because I didn't know if they would fray in the process of mailing. So anyway, you get to cut them off yourself. And here's my glue dots. Do you do this too? I always wrap a piece of scrap paper around my glue dot ring so that this release paper doesn't fall off, and then that way it protects whatever I'm going to set this next to so it doesn't get full of glue dots. So I'm going to pull these things down a little bit, decide which side I want for front and back. That's going to be the back, so then I'm just going to put one, maybe two glue dots on there, and the glue dots will help to hold those those little legs of the bow in position. In fact, but anyway, there is the project. And it's a good way to use the catalog with your customers and show them how they can do a card that is based on something they see in the catalog, but not exactly, and change it up to suit what they think looks better for them. That concludes Make and Take project number 1. Leave a comment below with how you would change it up and how you would make it different. Let me know if you've done any of this stenciling using the die cut hole as a stencil for your customers, or just even using a regular stencil with Versamark to do a background like that. Let me know what you think of the look of the foil hanging out from the bottom down there, and we'll catch you with the next Make and Take.